congregation of chickens listened to him more closely than some of his colleagues in Congress. John also thought that his chickens were just a little more productive. At least they produced eggs, he said. From Troy to the sit-ins of Nashville, from the Freedom Rides to the March on Washington, from Freedom Summer to Selma, John Lewis always looked outward, not inward. He always thought of others. He always believed in preaching the gospel in word and in deed, insisting that hate and fear had to be answered with love and hope. John Lewis believed in the Lord. He believed in humanity, and he believed in America. He's been called an American saint, a believer willing to give up everything, even life itself, to bear witness to the truth that drove him all his life. That we could build a world of peace and justice, harmony and dignity and love. And the first crucial step on that journey was the recognition that all people are born in the image of God and carry a spark of the divine within them. Laura and I were privileged to see that spark in John up close. We worked with him to bring the National Museum of African American History and Culture to the Washington Mall. He was instrumental in the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crimes Act, which I signed to seek resolution in cases where justice had been too long denied. And we will never forget joining him in Selma, Alabama for the 50th anniversary of his march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where we got to watch President Barack Obama thank John as one of his heroes. There's a story in the old scriptures that meant a lot to John. In the Hebrew Bible, the Lord is looking for a prophet. Whom shall I send, God wonders, and who will go for us? Isaiah answers, here am I, send me. John Lewis heard that call a long time ago in segregated Alabama, and he took up the work of the Lord through all his days. His lesson for us is that we must all keep ourselves open to open to hearing the call of love, the call of service, and the call to sacrifice for others. Listen, John and I had our disagreements, of course. But in the America John Lewis fought for, and the America I believe in, differences of opinion are inevitable elements and evidence of democracy in action. We, the people, including congressmen and presidents, can have differing views on how to perfect our union, while sharing the conviction that our nation, however flawed, is at heart a good and noble one. We live in a better and nobler country today because of John Lewis and his abiding faith in the power of God, in the power of democracy, and in the power of love to lift us all to a higher ground. The story that began in Troy isn't ending here today, nor is the work. John Lewis lives forever in his Father's house, and he will live forever in the hearts of Americans who act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with their God. May the flights of angels see John Lewis to his rest, and may God bless the country he loved.
Hello again. This is Shar, and now joining me. Hello again. This is Shar, and now joining me is activist DeRay McKesson. Welcome, DeRay. Thank you for joining us. We're about to go to a break again, but for those of you tuning in on Revolt TV, we'll be right back after this commercial break. And for those of you watching on live stream, stick around for continued coverage.
First, I thank John Miles and the Lewis family and John's incomparable staff for a chance to say a few words about a man I loved for a long time. I am grateful, Pastor Warnock, to say it in Ebenezer, a holy place sanctified by both the faith and the works of those who have worshiped here. I thank my friend, Reverend Bernice King, who stood by my side and gave a fascinating sermon in one of the most challenging periods of my life. I thank President and Mrs. Bush, President Obama, Speaker Pelosi, thank you, and Representative Hoyer and Representative Clyburn, who I really thank for, with the stroke of a hand, ending an intra-family fight within our party, proving that peace is needed by everyone. Madam Mayor, thank you. You have faced more than a fair share of challenges in these last few months, and you have faced them with candor and dignity and honor. And I thank you for your leadership. I must say, for a fellow that got a start speaking to chickens, John's gotten a pretty finely organized and orchestrated and deeply deserved send-off this last week. His homegoing has been something to behold. I think it's important that all of us who loved him remember that he was, after all, a human being. A man like all other humans, born with strengths that he made the most of when many don't. Born with weaknesses that he worked hard to beat down when many can't. But still a person. It made him more interesting, and it made him, in my mind, even greater. 20 years ago, we celebrated the 35th anniversary of the Selma March, and we walked together along with Coretta and many others from the movement who are no longer with us. We're grateful for Andy Young and Reverend Jackson and Diane Nash and many others who survived. But on that day, I got him to replay for me a story he told me when we first met back in the 1970s. And I said, you know, I was just an aspiring whatever Southern politician and hadn't been elected governor, and he was already a legend. So I said, John, what's the closest you ever actually came to getting killed doing this? And he said, well, once we were at a demonstration and I got knocked down on the ground and people were getting beat up pretty bad, and all of a sudden I looked up and there was a man holding a long, heavy piece of pipe, and he lifted it and was clearly going to bring it right down into my skull. And at the very last second, I turned my neck away, and then the crowd pushed him a little bit. A couple of seconds later, I couldn't believe I was still alive. I think it's important to remember that. First, because he was a quick thinker. And secondly, because he was here on a mission that was bigger than personal ambition. Things like that sometimes just happen, but usually they don't. I think three things happened to John Lewis long before we met and became friends that made him who he was. First, the famous story of John at 4 with his cousins and siblings holding his aunt's hand, more than a dozen of them, running around in a little old wooden house as the wind threatened to blow the house off its moorings, going to the place where the house was rising and all those tiny bodies trying to weigh it down. I think he learned something about the power of working together, something that was more powerful than any instruction. Second, nearly 20 years later, when he was 23, the youngest speaker and the last speaker at the March on Washington, when he gave a great speech urging people to take to the streets across the South to seize the chance to finally end racism. And he listened to people that he knew had the same goal, say, well, we have to be careful how we say this because we're trying to get converts, not more adversaries. Just 3 years later, he lost the leadership of SNCC to Stokely Carmichael because he said, you know, it was a pretty good job for a guy that young and come from Troy, Alabama. It must have been painful to lose, but he showed as a young man, there are some things that you cannot do to hang on to a position, because if you do them, you won't be who you are anymore. And I say there were 2 or 3 years there where the movement went a little bit too far towards Stokely, but in the end, John Lewis prevailed. We are here today because he had the kind of character he showed when he lost an election. Then there was Bloody Sunday.
It's such a powerful ceremony, and as you can see, President Bill Clinton gave a heartfelt tribute for Representative John Lewis. For our TV viewers, we have to go to a break now, and for those viewers who are watching on the live stream, we want you to continue watching. We'll be right back. As you can see, this has been a heartfelt presentation and talk by President Bill Clinton for Representative John Lewis. For our TV viewers, we have to go to break now. And for the people watching on the live stream, we want you to continue watching. We'll be right back.
But John put an apple, an orange, a toothbrush, toothpaste in the backpack to take care of his body because he figured he would get arrested. And 2 books, one, a book by Richard Hofstadter on America's political tradition to feed his mind, and one, the autobiography of Thomas Merton, a Roman Catholic Trappist monk who was the son of itinerant artists, making an astonishing personal transformation. What's a young guy who's about to get his brains beat out and planning on going to prison doing, taking that? I think he figured that if Thomas Merton could find his way and keep his faith and believe in the future, he, John Lewis, could too. And so we honor our friend for his faith and for living his faith, which the scripture says is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. John Lewis was a walking rebuke to people who thought, well, we ain't there yet. We've been working a long time. Isn't it time to bag it? He kept moving. He hoped for and imagined and lived and worked and moved for his beloved community. He took a savage beating on more than one day. And he lost that backpack on Bloody Sunday. Nobody really knows what happened to it. Maybe someday someone will be stricken with conscience and give some of it back. But what it represented never disappeared from John Lewis's spirit. We honor that memory today because as a child he learned to walk with the wind, to march with others to save a tiny house. Because as a young man he challenged others to join him with love and dignity to hold America's house down and open the doors of America to all its people. We honor him because in Selma, on the third attempt, John and his comrades showed that sometimes you have to walk into the wind along with it. As he crossed the bridge and marched into Montgomery. But no matter what, John always kept walking to reach the beloved community. He got into a lot of good trouble along the way, but let's not forget, he also developed an absolutely uncanny ability to heal troubled waters. When he could have been angry and determined to cancel his adversaries, he tried to get converts instead. He thought the open hand was better than the clenched fist. He lived by the faith and promise of St. Paul, let us not grow weary in doing good. For in due season we will reap if we do not lose heart. He never lost heart. He fought the good fight, he kept the faith, but we got our last letter today on the pages of the New York Times. Keep moving. It is so fitting on the day of his service, he leaves us our marching orders. Keep moving. 20 years ago when I came here after the Selma March to a big dinner honoring John and Lillian and John Miles, you had a big afro. And it was really pretty. And your daddy was giving you grief about it, and I said, John, let's don't get old too soon. I mean, if I had hair like that, I'd have it down to my shoulders. But on that night, I was almost out of time, and people were to be present, and people were asking me, well, if you could do one more thing, what it would be, or what do you wish you had done that you didn't, and all that kind of stuff. And someone asked me that night, because I had many friends in Atlanta, and I said, if I could just do one thing, if God came to me tonight and said, okay, your time's up, you got to go home, and I'm not a genie, I'm not giving you 3 wishes. One thing, what would it be? I said I would infect every American with whatever it was that John Lewis got as a 4-year-old kid and took through a lifetime to keep moving and keep moving in the right direction and keep bringing other people to move and to do it without hatred in his heart, with a song, to be able to sing and dance. As John's brother Freddie said in Troy, keep moving to the ballot box, even if it's a mailbox, and keep moving to the beloved community. John Lewis was many things, but he was a man, a friend in sunshine and storm, a friend who would walk the stony roads that he asked you to walk, that would brave the chastening rods he asked you to be whipped by, always keeping his eyes on the prize, always believing none of us will be free until all of us are equal. I just loved him. I always will. And I'm so grateful that he stayed true.
As you can see, President Bill Clinton has such a heartfelt tribute for Representative John Lewis.
Yeah, it is powerful. So many people have these stories about Representative Lewis and the life that he lived. I think about my last conversation with Representative Lewis was in the White House with President Obama and C.T. Vivian. We were in a meeting of intergenerational civil rights leaders, and it's been powerful to listen to President Clinton. I can't wait to hear what President Obama has to say about him. But just remembering such a long legacy is really beautiful.
It really is, and to see him touch so many people.
Yeah.
As you can see, President Clinton has really received an impact from John Lewis. Now we're going to take a look at Nancy Pelosi.
Reverend Warnock, thank you for enabling us all to be here in the Ebenezer Baptist Church to honor and celebrate the life of John Lewis with 3 presidents of the United States. Isn't that exciting? President Clinton, President Bush, and soon President Obama here with us. On behalf of my colleagues as Speaker of the House, I'm pleased to bring greetings to each and every one of you. I'm sad to bring condolences to the family, to John, Miles, to the entire Lewis family. Thank you for sharing John Lewis with us. I'm pleased to be here with so many members, 50. We would have had more, except coronavirus prevented the church from allowing us to bring more. But I hope they will all stand, members of the House of Representatives, Senators Harris and Booker, who are with us as well. Senators Harris and Booker. Among them, Mr. Hoyer, Steny Hoyer, Mr. Clyburn, Jim Clyburn, and I served with John Lewis for over 30 years. Over 30 years. And in our group, we have senior members and we have members of our freshman class. John convinced each one of us that we were his best friend in Congress. And we come with a flag flown over the Capitol the night that John passed. When this flag flew there, it said goodbye. It waved goodbye to John, our friend, our mentor, our colleague, this beautiful man that we all had the privilege of serving with in the Congress of the United States. So again, we all bring our condolences to the family and to Michael Collins and John's staff, who meant so very much to him. Thank you for your service to John Lewis. There are many things we're grateful to the family for and to the staff for, and we commend them for, but let's acknowledge the stamina they have had to keep up with John even as he passed on from Troy to Selma to Montgomery to Washington and now to Atlanta to be at rest. When John Lewis served with us, he wanted us to see the civil rights movement and the rest through his eyes. He told us so many stories. He taught us so much. And he took us to Selma for 2 decades, Mr. President. He took us to Selma. You referenced 25 years. Some of us were there many, many times, including 50th anniversary where President Bush was, as well as President Obama. And he wanted us to see how important it was to understand the spirit of nonviolence. I hesitate to speak about nonviolence in the presence of the master himself, Reverend Lawson, who we'll be hearing from shortly. We were together just recently in Selma when he and John spoke at church, and he taught the world really about nonviolence. But I just want to say this. The word satyagraha is a word that in Sanskrit means 2 things. It means nonviolence, and it means insistence on the truth. And that is what John Lewis was all about. Nonviolently insisting on the truth. He insisted on the truth of Nashville and Selma and Washington, D.C., at the Lincoln Memorial. He insisted on the truth wherever he went. And he insisted on the truth in the Congress of the United States. Every time he stood up to speak, we knew that he was going to take us to a higher place of our understanding of what our responsibilities were and what our opportunities were, and he insisted.
As you can see, Nancy Pelosi as well has had such an impact from all of the hard work and dedication that John Lewis has placed into not only this movement, but the progression of the liberation of African Americans as well as America going in a better direction. We're so thankful for John Lewis and the impact that he has had. We're going to take a quick break for our TV viewers. And for those of you watching us on live stream, continue watching because we'll be right back. We're live on Revolt.
I brought him this flag pin that I wear, one just like it. Why I did so on that 4th of July weekend was because it is engraved with something that says, one country, one destiny. Now, wasn't that what John Lewis was all about? One country, one destiny. I mention it because this was embroidered into the lining of Abraham Lincoln's coat that he had on the night he left us. I think he had the coat on all the time, but also that night. And John Lewis and Abraham Lincoln had so much in common. We got to know him first and foremost in front of the Lincoln Memorial when he made that beautiful, beautiful speech. John, land state, under the rotunda, in the rotunda of the Capitol, under the dome of the Capitol, on a catafalque platform that was made in 1865 to hold the casket of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, John Lewis. John Lewis. So they had lots of connections. And by the way, just incidentally, they were both wonderful and spiritual and saintly, but they were both very good politicians. Think of John Lewis that way. You who know him know that. He always was about a more perfect union. And he was always about young people. That's why, Mr. President, that article you referenced in the New York Times today, his message that would be delivered at this time as he left us, was about young people. He said to them, together you can redeem the world. Together, always perfect union, together, one nation, one destiny. And he says in the article, answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe in. Wasn't that just like John? We were very proud to have his...
Welcome back to the live coverage of Representative John Lewis's funeral. We are now continuing to hear Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker Pelosi, give her thoughts and condolences to the family, to the country, and to honor the life of John Lewis. Please continue watching.
But what I want you to know, in addition to how revered he is in the Congress, so revered that, he was a bit mischievous. He when he would say, let's make some good trouble, he always had sort of a twinkle in his eye and a kind of a spark about it all. And my colleagues can tell you that when he cooked up having the sit-in on, to get the Republican leadership to put the gun violence prevention bill on the floor, when he did that and all the members followed him, the floor was covered with people, and thought for a moment that perhaps the police might, because it was disruptive, good trouble. It was clear to them that if they were to arrest John Lewis for doing that, they were going to have to arrest the entire House Democratic caucus. So when he spoke, people listened. When he led, people followed. We loved him very much. As his official family, we mourn him greatly. He shared so much with that his love for his district, his family, the sadness when Lillian was sick, the joy he had in John Miles. But as I said, we waved goodbye to this person, our leader, our friend, this, shall we say, humorous. He loved to dance. He loved to make us laugh, sometimes while he was dancing. He said, my granddaughter Bella said to him, did you ever sing in the civil rights movement? He said, they asked me to sing solo one time. Solo so that nobody could hear me. But anyway, getting back to that flag waving goodbye to this person we had just loved officially, personally, in every way, politically too. But last night he was at the Capitol. It wasn't raining. Thousands of people were showing up to pay their respects. A little bit after 8 o'clock, there was a double rainbow. A double rainbow. But it hadn't rained. It was a double rainbow over the casket. And for us, it was, we waved goodbye when he started to leave us. He was telling us, I'm home in heaven. I'm home in heaven with Lillian. We always knew he worked on the side of the angels, and now he is with them. May he rest in peace. Thank you.
Pastor, sisters and brothers, members of this Lewis family that so wonderfully nurtured John in love, hope, courage, faith, the rest of it. And sisters and brothers, Czesław Milosa, a Polish Catholic poet, sets the tone, at least in part for me, as John Lewis has journeyed from the eternity of this extraordinary, mysterious human race into the eternity that none of us know very much about. When he wrote this poem called Meaning, when I die, I will see the lining of the world, the other side, beyond bird, mountain, sunset. The true meaning ready to be decoded. What never added up will now add up. What was incomprehensible will become comprehended. And if there is no lining to the world, if a thrush on a branch is not a sign, but just a thrush on a branch, if night and day make no sense following each other, and on this earth there is nothing but the earth, even if that is so, there will remain a word, wakened by the lips that perish, a tireless messenger who runs and runs through interstellar places, through revolving galaxies, and calls out and protests and screams. And I submit that John in that other eternity will be heard by us again and again, running through the galaxies, still proclaiming that we, the people of the USA, can one day live up to the full meaning of we hold these truths. Live up to the full meaning, we, the people of the USA, in order to perfect a more perfect union. John Lewis practiced not the politics that we call bipartisan. John Lewis practiced the politics that we, the people of the U.S., need more desperately than ever before, the politics of the Declaration of Independence, politics of the preamble to the Constitution of the United States. I've read many of the so-called civil rights books of the last 50 or 60 years about the period between 1953 and 1973. Most of the books are wrong about John Lewis. Most of the books are wrong about how John got engaged in the national campaign of 1959-60. This is the 60th year of the sit-in campaign, which swept into every state of the Union, largely manned by students because we recruited students, but put up on the map that the nonviolent struggle begun in.
You're seeing activist James Lawson share kind words about Representative John Lewis. DeRay, as an activist, What is your significance? What is the significance of your work in a time like this?
Yeah, I think that what Representative Lewis' life reminds us is that movements are big places. He was one of many people who was in the street. He was one of many people who believed in this work and was willing to risk their lives for it. And when I think about the movement today, that is definitely the spirit in the street today. You saw hundreds of thousands, millions of people in the street all across the world because they were willing to risk it all because they knew that we deserve something better. And that is something that will be eternally inspired by Representative Lewis for. What about you, Shar? How do you think about this moment?
It just lets me know that, during these times, you just have to do what you can. But if you can't do the biggest thing, like being on front lines, you just need to do something. So once again, for those of you tuning in on Revolt TV, we'll be right back after this commercial break. We still have President Barack Obama coming up, and I know you don't want to miss that. So for those of you watching our live stream, stick around for continued live coverage. This is Revolt TV.
And when Kelly Miller Smith and the Nashville Christian Leadership Council met in the fall of 1958, and we determined that if there's to be a second major campaign that will demonstrate the efficacy of satyagraha, of soul force, of love truth, that we would have to do it in Nashville. And so I planned, as the strategist and organizer, a 4-point Gandhian strategic program to create the campaign. We decided with great fear and anticipation we would desegregate downtown Nashville. No group of black people or other people anywhere in the United States in the 20th century against the rapaciousness of a segregated system ever thought about desegregating downtown, tearing down the signs, renovating the waiting rooms, taking the immoral signs off of drinking fountains. But it was black women who made that decision for us in Nashville. I was scared to death when we made that decision. I knew nothing about how we were going to do this. I had never done it before. But we planned the strategy. John Lewis did not stumble in on that campaign. Kelly Miller Smith, his teacher at ABC, invited John to join the workshops in the fall of 1959 as we prepared ourselves to face violence and to do direct action and to put on the map the issue that the racism and the segregation of the nation had to end. So in the 60th anniversary of that sit-in campaign, which became the second major campaign of the nonviolent movement of America, those are not my words. John Lewis called what we did between 1953 and 1973 the nonviolent movement of America, not the CRM. I think we need to get the story straight because words are powerful. History must be written in such a fashion that it lifts up truly the spirit of the John Lewises of the world. And that's why I've chosen just to say a few words about it. Kelly Miller Smith invited John Lewis. I met a Fisk student who told me about a student from Chicago who wanted to do something about those vicious signs. I said, invite Diane Nash to the workshop in September because we're going to do something about those signs. I pushed this hard. Now, John Lewis had no choice in the matter. You should understand that. because all the stories we've heard this morning of John becoming a preacher, preaching to the chickens and other sorts of things, becoming ordained as a Baptist minister. Something else was happening to John in those early years. John saw the malignancy of racism in Troy, Alabama. There formed in him a sensibility that he had to do something about it. He did not know what that was, but he was convinced that he was called indeed to do whatever he could do, get in good trouble, but stop the horror that so many folk lived through and in this country in that part of the 20th century. John was not alone. Martin King had the same experience as a boy. I had the same experience from age 4 in the streets of Massillon, Ohio. Matthew McCullum, a pastor whose name you don't know in South Carolina, had the same experience. C.T. Vivian had the same experience. I maintain that many of us had no choice to do what we tried to do, primarily because at an early age we recognized the wrong under which we were forced to live, and we swore to God that by God's grace we would do whatever God called us to do in order to put on the table of the nation's agenda. This must end. Black Lives Matter. And so between 1953 and 1973, we had major campaigns year after year. Thousands of demonstrations across the nation that supported it. We had folk in the Congress, folk in the White House, folks scattered across the United States who were beginning to formulate what the solutions are for change. The media makes a mistake when John is seen only in relationship to the Voting Rights Bill of 65. However important that is, you must not remember that in the 60s, Lyndon Johnson and the Congress of the United States passed the most advanced legislation on behalf of we, the people of the United States, that was ever passed. Head Start. Billions of dollars for housing. We would not be in the struggle we are today in housing if President Reagan hadn't cut that billions of dollars for housing, where local churches and local nonprofits could build affordable housing in their own communities, being sustained and financed by loans from the federal government. We passed Medicare. We passed anti-poverty programs. Civil Rights Bill 64, 65, voting rights bills. A whole array. John Lewis must be understood as one of the leaders of the greatest advance of Congress and the White House on behalf of we, the people of the USA. We do not need bipartisan politics if we're going to celebrate the life of John Lewis. We need the Constitution to come alive. We hold these truths to be self-evident. We need the Congress and the presidents to work unfalteringly on behalf of every boy and every girl so that every baby born on these shores will have access to the tree of life. That's the only way to honor John Robert Lewis. No other way. let all of us in the service today, let all the people of the USA determine that we will not be quiet as long as any child dies in the first year of life in the United States. We will not be quiet as long as the largest poverty group in our nation are women and children.
So before we went on a break, we were speaking about the importance of activism in today's climate where racial injustice still exists. Putting action behind ideas of freedom and justice is so important, especially with the upcoming elections today. Actually, today, the New York Times published an essay written by John Lewis shortly before he died, saying in part, ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting into what he calls good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic processes are key, in addition to everything else that we're doing, because we have to use all of our tools. And the vote is one of the most powerful nonviolent change agents you have in a democratic society. Whether you agree with it or not, you must use it because it's not a guarantee. You can lose it. The importance of voting in these elections right now, you see what's going on. We have a tyrant for a president. So why would you not use all of your tools, whether you agree or disagree? This is one of the things that we do have, and they've been fighting. I mean, when you think about it, DeRay, they've been fighting us and oppressing us with music, with food, with land, with so many different things. So why would we only use one of our tools? How important is this election and this current climate for the liberation of our people to you right now, DeRay?
Yeah, I'll just zoom out and remind us all that there are people still alive today who fought for the right to vote. That is wild, right? That, like, when people think about it, they're like, oh, well, that fight was centuries ago. You're like, no, there are people who are like our great-grandparents, our grandparents, who, like, when they were kids, they did not have the right to vote. That is wild. So now I think about what it means to even honor that legacy while also knowing, right, that voting alone is not enough. That, like, there are people who voted their entire lives and there's still poverty, there's still hunger, there's still a host of injustices. But voting is one of the key tools in the toolkit. So we know that the only way that we'll build the house that we deserve and take down the house that we got stuck in is if we use all of the tools at our disposal. There's no one tool that will do either of those things. But what we do know is that not using the tools means that we'll never win. And voting is one of the tools that has to be used in the toolkit.
And also, I need you guys to be proactive, not reactive. You have to vote like you're Black. We know voter suppression exists. We know that they're going to, try to tell us, oh, you're at the wrong polling place, trying to cut off times, trying to tell you got the wrong name, trying to purge your vote. Don't wait till when you go to vote to check and see if you're able to vote. Being Black in America makes it harder for us to vote. So let's check our voter registration cards now. Let's make sure we're active. Let's make sure our addresses is up to date. If you moved, let's make sure we update those things. We have to also be proactive. I don't want to wait until it's election days to find out what's going on. And also, we have to not only care about, the general elections and the biggest ones that we see advertisements for all day, when in reality, the local politics is what changes your life the quickest. Anyways, y'all, we will be right back after this commercial break. We still have President Barack Obama coming up, and you don't want to miss that. So for those of you that are watching live on TV, we'll be right back. For those of you watching our live stream, stick around for our continued live coverage on Revolt TV.
The chance of such a world, I dream. Celebrate life, dream and labor for an Atlanta, Los Angeles, and the United States, and a world. That is to celebrate the spirit and the heart and the mind and soul of John Lewis, and to walk with him through the galaxy. galaxies, seeking equality, liberty, justice, and a beloved community for all. Thank you.
Three living presidents with us today. We have heard from yet another. To the friends and family of Congressman John Lewis, Rosalind joins me in sending our condolences to all gathered today to mourn the loss of one of our nation's great leaders. Throughout his remarkable life, John has been a blessing to countless people, and we are proud to be among those whose lives he has touched. While his achievements are enjoyed by all Americans, we Georgians know him as our neighbor, friend, and representative. His enormous contributions will continue to be an inspiration for generations to come. Please know that you are in our hearts and prayers during this difficult time. We hope your warm memories and the love and prayers of your family and friends will be of comfort to you in the days ahead. Sincerely, Jimmy Carter.
If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody that he's traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not be in vain. Yes, my living shall not be in vain. If I could help somebody along, then my living shall not be in vain. Oh, if I can do my duty as a Christian, oh, if I can bring back beauty in a world abroad, if I could share love's message that the Master taught, then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not be in vain. Yes, my living, yes, it shall not be in vain.
Right now, we have Kathleen Bertrand performing If I Can Help Somebody. Lewis, at the age of 23 and leader in the civil rights movement, took the podium at the March on Washington in 1963 as the youngest speaker. I think it's also important to note that he was arrested 40 times, y'all, between 1960 and 1966 for protesting racist laws and practices in the Jim Crow South. Current protests, people who see protesters as problematic, please do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. This is the struggle of a lifetime. You know, and for people to see protesters as problematic, but don't see the killing of our people continuously for over 400 years as a problem, it makes you question where their morals are. Because right now, of all the times, we should not still be fighting in 2020 the same thing that John Lewis fought for. Right now, it's time to send a message that we will not stop until we reach freedom. We're not gonna shut up. It's nothing you can do. DeRay, I don't know how much y'all been getting fought right now for the liberation of our people, but yo, we've been getting hit on all sides. But guess what? We ain't going nowhere. We.
No, you're
what
right.
did
You know,
he
it's so
say?
interesting.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Can't stop, won't stop. Stay ready, so you don't have to get ready. Right? Is that
Okay.
people praise civil disobedience? They talk about people like Dr. King, C.T. Vivian, John Lewis, and they praise sort of that era of civil disobedience, and then they get mad when they realize that like part of civil disobedience is the disobedience, right? That like
DeRay, wait, pause. DeRay, we are literally in a time, it's people literally at the funeral who have been going against protesters, but they are honoring someone who was one of the biggest protesters of his generation. But anyway, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, everybody loves civil disobedience until the disobedience, and you're like, well, that's part of the game. but like part of it actually is challenging and pushing. And people, the first person ever permanently banned from Twitter was banned for raising money to try and get me killed. I have a case we're appealing to the Supreme Court now about the right to protest because an officer got hurt at a protest that I was at in Baton Rouge and he sued. So, this continues where they attack people who are leading protests, who are in protests. But like his life reminds us, is that we got to keep trucking, right? That the system will do whatever it can to make us too afraid to fight, and we'll never be too afraid to fight for what we believe in.
Exactly. And understand that change that isn't always pretty. We're going to go back right now to the live coverage of the funeral of civil rights icon John Lewis.
Christian Leadership Conference. And that's when I met John. Saw him all the time. We were all involved in the same quest for equity and justice in this America. And I got a chance to see him all the time. And I admired his fervor and all of his tenacity. And Lillian was single. And so I decided that Lillian needed a good man, not just the bums who were approaching her. She was highly intellectual, well-traveled, well-educated, and I wanted her to have someone who really would appreciate her skills and her talent. So I looked around and decided that I like John. But Lillian didn't like John particularly. And so she thought he was kind of slow. And I said, but Lillian, he's busy. He's fighting the evils of the world. And she said, yes, but. Well, I decided, girl, listen, this boy is going places. So let's see what he can do to get this thing moving. So we decided what I did as her friend. And that's what you do for friends. You have to help them out. And so John had to go to the hospital for an examination. And I said, oh, Lillian, this would be a good moment for us to be Florence Nightingale. So we went to the grocery store and bought a little bunch of flowers and took it to the hospital. I said, you'll be impressed, because he was a little slow too. And I said, we'll go to the hospital, and that would just impress him, that he will notice you more because you're bringing him flowers while he's in the hospital. Well, we got in the hospital, and there was a young woman already there. And she was straightening out his pillow and adjusting his comfort. Then Lillian said, oh, shoot. But I said, but I've already asked John, do you have a young woman who you are especially interested in? And he said, well, not really. And I said, that's not the answer I'm looking for. I want a more definitive answer, because I got some things in mind. Well, John was just slow about, well, not really. Well, I decided on New Year's Eve. Lillian was single, as I said, and didn't have any plans. So I said, well, I'll have a dinner party. And
we're on Revolt watching Zernona Clayton, founder of the Trumpet Foundation, speak now. Once again, for those of you tuning in on Revolt TV, we'll be right back after this commercial break. We still have President Barack Obama coming up, and I know y'all don't want to miss He about to hit the stage. For those watching our live stream, stick around for continued live coverage. We're live on Revolt.
Well, and when John didn't have a date, on New Year's Eve, I knew he didn't have a commitment. Everybody has a date on New Year's Eve with somebody somewhere. So I figured, well, I'm ahead of the game now. It's New Year's Eve, and here I've got him. And then things start happening. And still slowly, not fast enough for me, but I was patient. And finally, Lillian said, I do like him. I said, okay, I'm ready now. I'll set a date, got a dress ready, and we're going to have a wedding. And so And I'm not really sure. I asked John not too long ago, did we ever ask you, would you take her? I don't think I ever got him an opportunity to propose. We just had a wedding. And so now it looks like things are going to be okay. So we had a big wedding. I did all the planning because Lillian was still slow. And I did all the planning and had the big wedding. All the family came, so we had a wedding. Now things were doing okay. And she said, but I don't like the idea of that girl. Looks like she had, some designs on John. I said, honey, don't run away from competition. We can handle competition. We'll get rid of that girl so fast she won't know what happened to her. And we did. And they got married. Well, I want you to know they were very happy. But when she found out, now Lillian, as I said, well-traveled, well-educated, but she absolutely didn't like politics. Sorry, people, she didn't like politics. But when John expressed an interest, Lillian got in there and became his strongest supporter. I mean, she did everything to make his successes work for him, and they did. Well, then John Miles came along, and he was the cutest little boy. And then she said, they gave me the honor of being his godmother. And I said, oh, that's nice. And I've heard of godmothers, but what does godmother do? What am I supposed to do? And she said, well, if something happens to me and John, we want you to take care of him. I said, we got to feed him? Because John Miles could eat as a kid. And I said, got to feed him every day? He said, yes. And then spank him when he acts up. Well, I agreed to that. But John Miles, do you mind? Just stand up, John Miles. Stand up. There's John Miles now. Now wait a minute. Take a good look at John Miles. I'm 4'11", and they tell me almost 90 years old. And there he is. And I'm supposed to spank him when he doesn't do right. Now, when I walk up to John Miles to give him a spanking, I got to get permission from him. Can I spank you? Because he's pretty big now. But I love John Miles then, and I love John Miles now. And I will take care of you and spank you whether you like it or not. Okay. But Lillian and John stayed married. I put it together, but it lasted 43 years. That's not a bad record, is it? They were happy, and Lillian gave him every support a wife could ever give a partner. And they gave love to John Miles in the process. John was an unusual individual. Ambassador Young was sitting over here, and we all loved him all the time. His sincerity was apparent. He worked hard, and he said that he wasn't going to stop. And I don't need to tell you anything about John. All of you knew him. All of you know his fervor and his commitment to equity and the love he had for everybody. And I want us to look at the John we thought we knew, the John who convinced us we knew the real man because he was constant. But I asked him one time, John, what in the world is bad trouble? I said when I was a young girl, my sister and I, we were courting. Every time we go out on a date, my mother said, okay, have a good time, but don't get in no trouble. Well, we didn't know nothing else except trouble was not good. But John said, the good trouble is when your mother says, don't get in trouble, find a way to right the wrongs of our society. And he did a pretty decent job of that. And during this week, John was on television all day, every day. And I love young people. And I had an opportunity when people know that I like young people. So I was invited to speak to a group of kids. And I said to them, as you're watching television, I want you to know that's not a public relations program you're watching. That's a story of a man who lived the life they're talking about. John made a decision on the kind of life he was going to live. And I said to those young people that you have the responsibility of making your life have the meaning you want it to be. You can either decide to be the bank robber or the bank owner. It's your choice. The man you're seeing on television decided that his life was going to have a quality to it. Do as much as you can, as long as you can, as often as you can, because that's what John Lewis did. We won't forget John, but I would want to tell you, don't sit here and listen to these phrases. Don't forget what you read in the newspapers, how wonderful he was. Do something about the man he asked us to be in ourselves. And that is, be kind to everybody, love everybody, speak up and speak out. I don't need to tell you that, you know what he said. But what you can do, and I want to advise you and admonish you, to really give meaning to the John we love, vote. Thank you.
To John Miles, Obama, Speaker Pelosi, Madam Mayor. Romans 8:18 tells us, "For I consider the sufferings of the present time to not be worthy of the glory which shall be revealed to us." When I met John Lewis over 40 years ago, our lives intersected because in 1960 he came to my hometown, Raleigh, North Carolina, to form SNCC at a small black college, Shaw University, where my father, who was president of the NAACP, led nightly civil rights demonstrations. Again, in 1963, our lives intersected because my father returned from the March on Washington, and he began raving about a speaker, young John Lewis, who had electrified the crowd. And so imagine when I finally met him in Atlanta in 1976 as a young law student, it was a transcendent moment, like meeting a historical figure, Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, but yet here was someone who had made America live up to those noble words. Right. Along with Dr. King and Reverend Abernathy and Andy Young and Joseph Lowry, C.T. Vivian, another lion who we lost on the same day as John Lewis. John had an incorruptible integrity and an ideological purity which was like a halo. Somehow this extended to everyone who was in his orbit, myself included. And that's the reason the nation has paused from pandemic, protests, and politics to bid him farewell today. Virtually every news organization has hailed John as a civil rights hero. But John was a women's rights hero, a gay rights hero, a senior rights hero, a workers' hero, an immigrant rights hero. John wasn't on the right side of history. History was on the right side of John Lewis. And in his spare time, he introduced the legislation to create the African American History Museum. And he fought the bigots in Congress for 15 years until he triumphed yet again against insurmountable odds. One of his proudest moments was standing at the dedication of that monumental structure 4 years ago. And for those who wondered if perhaps his time had passed, with his body ravaged with cancer, so frail and fragile that he yielded to a cane, and what he surely knew would be his last public appearance, he summoned the strength to walk to the middle of Black Lives Plaza in Washington, D.C., to express his solidarity and support for the young protesters who had begun to change America as John Lewis did as a young man. They say that the victors write history, and so I declare today that the history of the 20th century as it is written, John Lewis will stand beside Gandhi, King, and Mandela as one of the great transformative freedom fighters of humankind. And while the nation mourns a great leader, I will miss the dear, loving, and loyal friend who allowed me the extraordinary privilege to walk along beside a living saint, St. Louis. In the last days of his life, when we both knew that death was imminent, I desperately wanted to tell John about how much he had meant to me and to the country. But in a solemn moment, he pulled me closer and he whispered, "Everyone has to vote in November. It is the most important election ever." And I promised him that with every fiber in my body, I would tell everyone, if you truly want to honor this humble hero.
All righty, speaking now is William Campbell, Atlanta's former mayor. And you know the drill. For everyone watching Revolt TV, we'll be right back after this commercial break. But don't forget, President Barack Obama will be speaking shortly. So for those of y'all watching our live stream, stick around for continued live coverage. We are live on Revolt TV.
afternoon. I have on two masks because I have Mr. Lewis's voice in my head, and he would say be particular. My name is Jamila Thompson, and on behalf of the staff, I would like to thank John Miles and the entire Lewis family for the honor and the privilege of sharing the Congressman and Mrs. Lewis, who was his partner in life and in public service with generations of the staff for the last 33 years in the celebration of his life and his legacy. The Congressman would want me to tell you, as I look at you today in his favorite color, that you look good. You look fresh, you look clean, you look beautiful. Thank you. We are honored to serve you. We were honored to serve him. We would also like to express our sincere and our great appreciation to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Majority Leader, the Majority Whip, the Clerk of the House of Representatives, the Office of Employee Assistance, the Congressional Black Caucus, and all of your amazing staff for your patience and your guidance during this very difficult time. People always ask us, what was it like to work for Congressman Lewis? What was he like up close? What was he like in real life? And it is too difficult to explain, so our answer was always the same. He's just as you may imagine, but better, and that no day was ever the same. What you know about the Congressman is true. He was a gentleman. He was truly of the people and a peaceful soul. When he came into the office every single day, he would greet every staffer, every fellow, every intern with a good morning, sir, a good morning, ma'am. He would end every request, every successful speech, every successful bill, every hearing, every markup with, thank you, young brother. Thank you, sister. Thank you, my child, or my dear. As staff, we felt it was our duty to create and maintain a space where the Congressman could be completely and wholly himself. In college, we often say that there's the freshman 15 that you gain a little bit around. Well, in our office, there was the John Lewis 20. Because he and Michael would bring in lunch and far, far too often dessert, because some cake or some pie or some brownie would be calling out to them in the grocery store, and they would want everyone to come together and sit down and share a meal. We were a little family, a little enclave. A lot of drama, a lot of fun, and so much love. He broke down those work barriers, and he welcomed our parents, our spouses, our children, our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews, our godchildren, and our friends into the circle, making them fall equally in awe of his greatness. Sometimes the world got a little glimpse of our nest during these impromptu gatherings, and certain videos may go viral. Well, we were like a well-oiled machine when it came to policy and casework. Although we were like that in public, he enjoyed stirring things up in the office. You might call him a little bit of an instigator. He would get us in trouble with Michael, try and corner us with questions, and stir things up. And with time, you knew not to take the bait. And you would learn to say, oh no, Congressman, you're not gonna get me today. And he would laugh. I think that that's what I'm gonna miss the most. I'm gonna miss his laugh. And not the one that you see on television, but the one where he would be sitting back and shooting the wind, and he would throw back his head, and he would just laugh from his heart, from his belly, from his soul. So many workers are often taught to be invisible, but with Mr. Lewis, he always saw you and made you feel special and worthy. Dr. King and Rosa Parks spent time with him as a teenager, and it changed the course of his life. So I believe that he spent every waking moment paying it forward. He could be absolutely exhausted, but still take one more picture, spend one more moment, especially with young people. This meant that we were always, always, always behind schedule. So the very first lesson in staffing the congressman was to learn to operate on John Lewis time, which translates into late, but trusting that it would always work out. As he told everyone, he could outwalk the entire staff. And so our duty was to keep up. When it was time to move, we did. But when it was time to be present, and the congressman needed a little bit of quiet, we would try to create that space. He would slow down to appreciate and absorb the majesty of the moment for his own mental archives. Just as we tried to preserve the sanctity of his space, he allowed us to be our true and authentic selves, just the very best version. He found staff who were unique, and I think represented either a little bit of his personality or what he needed to complement it. We made our ways to Mr. Lewis through very random paths, coincidences, some strategies or others, and for believers, through divine intervention. He didn't hire based on a resume, but your energy, your being, your essence, your passion, and your potential. We were a medley group of musicians, air traffic controllers, photographers, dancers, social workers, entertainers, artists, historians, and every once in a while an actual lawyer or a political scientist. He got all into our business. And was there in spirit or in person for the big moments. In the same way that he always took a call from Mrs. Lewis or John Miles, he let us drop everything in a family emergency. And generations of children have fond memories of hanging out in his office as their parents worked nearby. He let us be ourselves, especially when it came to civic participation. He let us organize, protest, testify, and always, always, always vote. We tried to absorb his energy and his lessons. To my knowledge, 3 staff served him for over 20 years. Ruth Berg, Tueri Butler, and first cousin, Michael Collins. May you please stand. And there's a whole generation of staff who are right behind them at 19, at 15, at 17, at 12, at 10 years, at 14 years. Ruth Riley, Brenda Jones, Jared McKinley, Rochelle O'Neill. And then there are the staffers who could never really leave, like Linda Chastain and Jacob Gillison, whom we kept pulling back in as friends and confidants. Although some of you and some people moved on, you couldn't really, because his spirit was in you forever. His voice is always in our head. Be kind, be mindful, be particular. Make it plain, make it simple, make it sing. Working for him was a little bit of a nightmare sometimes. because as no matter how hard we worked, he always worked harder. Every single day he woke up at the crack of dawn, watched the news, and read the newspapers. His memory was like a living encyclopedia, which means he forgot nothing and could pull something back from 10 years ago because he knew it was the same staff and we were still there. He expected us to be informed with facts from primary sources, not hearsay. When he walked into the office, he would ask what constituents were calling and writing about and add that information to his endless archives. You learned the hard way, or the subtle way, because he was not direct. That when he asked you a question, he usually knew the answer, but wanted to see whether or not you could represent him and his constituents. When preparing for a big vote or a big speech, he would drop a subtle hint. Have you read this poem, this speech, a book, some scripture? Do you remember this painting? And then he would say, let's come back and talk about it later on. This little hint would prepare you for the aftermath of those executive sessions that he had with himself. And after those sessions, we would learn how and in which direction the Spirit moved him. And then we would have our marching orders. He would take the essence of a complicated policy and make it accessible and real to the people. The congressman loved serving on the Ways and Means Committee. He always showed up, and he hated to miss votes on the floor. Let me say that again. He could not stand to miss votes. The voice messages I have from him about the votes that he was about to miss are still on my phone to this day. This is the reason why we are so thankful that Congressman Kildee and his staff were willing to serve and to help us cast his ballots during this pandemic and to serve as his proxy. The congressman would walk the halls or sit in committee or sit in the office, and he loved the beauty of the House of Representatives. He loved its closeness to the people and the complicated reflection of the status of our nation. Every visitor to our office received a full dose of Southern hospitality, the offer of a Georgia Coke, some peanuts, a brief tour of his office, and some time on our beloved balcony with its stunning view of the U.S. Capitol. While he loved this country and all its people, the record should be clear on his immense pride in representing Georgia's 5th Congressional District. He was so proud to represent Metro Atlanta and all of its cities, all of its counties, and all of its people. He was on a mission to serve, to make them feel heard, respected, and represented, regardless of where they fell on the political spectrum. The constituents were our compass, and Congressman Lewis worked around the clock to find solutions to their challenges. When it came to public service and public policy, his name did not need to be on the headlines or on the front lines. It was the action and the results that mattered. Not every problem needs a bill. And he could always find compromise without compromising his values or his principles when the challenge presented itself. He played the long game, and he knew every trick in the book, and he expected the staff to fight in a nonviolent manner for the people. When constituents were concerned about the rights of Soviet Jewry, he took action. When faced with inequality in health services, he advanced technical changes to reduce the cost and increase services to life-saving care, especially for the issues that affected communities of color, like kidney disease and COPD. When workers faced pensions issues, he found ways to give them security. When families were separated by immigration policies, he worked around the clock to reunite.
Welcome back to Revolt TV's live coverage of Representative John Lewis. Speaking now is Jamila Thompson, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Georgia Congressman John Lewis. Why don't we all take a look together?
When he heard from frustrated veterans, he fought for their respect, their earned benefits, and their care. When he saw an alarming increase in abusive relationships, he developed strategies to stop the cycle before it began. When some tried to eliminate the U.S. Institute of Peace, he found a way and built a coalition to keep that building and the prospect and the hope of peace still alive. When he was worried about the state of our globe for generations yet unborn, he introduced the Environmental Justice Act. When looking at the rights of marginalized communities around the world, he worked to diversify the face of our diplomacy and insert empathy and standards to our global policies. And when people complained about immovable lines to vote, he co-wrote the Voter Empowerment Act. The list is too long to recognize his legislative and policy successes and the impact that he has on people across the nation and around the world. So I ask you, as we sit in this historic space, and as you drive through Metro Atlanta and you feel and you see the greatness of his legacy, historic preservation and civic education, I ask that you hold that in your heart and your soul and your spirit. He felt that we needed to know and study our history to make sure that we never repeated it. He was both human and divine. It is so difficult to explain the magnitude, the genius, the gentle grace of this man. I would ask at this moment for the staff to take a stand, please, so that you can see and know just a sample of who we are. Former staff, thank you. A few years ago, we had a reunion, and we realized that there aren't that many staff. We have a lot of interns and a lot of fellows, but the congressman held us close. I don't think that there are many offices where you have the opportunity to hold your boss's hand and to adjust his tie and to tell every person that you love them. He created this space. He created this family. As a staff, we are heartbroken. We are lost. But we know that the work continued.
Today is a somber day, but it's also one of celebration. John Lewis helped pave the way for the same fight that we're fighting still today. He was a civil rights activist who understood the importance of legislation. He went above and beyond the cause, and his life is one that we can look to for inspiration. You know, listening to each person go up and speak on the podium of the impact that John Lewis has had on their life, it fills me not only with inspiration, but also hope. It's hope for a more equal United States and hope for a just system. So as you watch, I want to personally invite you to think about what action you're going to take today. No matter how big, no matter how small, to create change for the people. Always remember, it's different places and sectors within the movement. It's different positions. Everybody's not going to be a frontline person. Don't worry about who has something to say about what you're doing. As long as what you're doing is towards the liberation for the fight of our people, you do what you can from the position that you're in. But right now, let's go back to the funeral of Congressman John Lewis.
Good afternoon, everyone.
My name is Sheila O'Brien, and I am the sixth niece of Congressman John Lewis. To each distinguished guest, member of clergy, family, and friends, on behalf of the Lewis family, we would like to say thank you from the very depths of our hearts for the outpour of love, support, words of encouragement, and prayer. The honor, the respect, the camaraderie that has been bestowed upon the Lewis family will never be forgotten. We would also like to take this opportunity to give a heartfelt thanks to the Chief of Staff, Michael Collins, who has now become first cousin, and to each staff member that has worked tirelessly with and for Congressman Lewis, especially during this time. Words are not enough to express how grateful we are for all that you have done, especially for our cousin John Miles. I am here today to pay tribute to a man that was larger than life. To the world, he is known as the Honorable Congressman John Lewis. But to his siblings, he is affectionately known as Robert. And to his many nieces and nephews, he is known as Uncle Robert. So if you would permit me to just call him Uncle Robert right now, I'd be grateful. Uncle Robert loved his family, and we, as you can tell, loved him. He was the son to our grandparents, Eddie Lewis, who we called Granddaddy Buddy, and Willie Mae Lewis, who we called Ma. He was the husband to one wife, our Aunt Lillian, the father to one son, our cousin John Miles, and the brother to a lot of siblings. Too many to name right now, we don't have time. While we knew how important he and his work was to the world, when we were with him, we saw Uncle Robert. We saw the man that enjoyed spending time with his family, reminiscing about days gone by, catching up on family dynamics, enjoying a good meal, sharing laughter and love. We, like the world, knew the John Robert Lewis that personified hope, courage, bravery, and sheer humanitarianism. As we all know, before he was chosen to Congress, yes, I say chosen, because the Word of God tells me that many are called, but few are chosen. His first call was to that of the civil rights movement. For the last 60 years, as a non-violent civil rights activist, he was a voice for those that couldn't speak, the feet for those that couldn't walk, and the champion of injustice for those that couldn't fight. He, along with many other civil rights icons, became the change agents that the world so desperately needed. As a member of Congress, he was known as the conscience of Congress. For over 30 years, he stood in solidarity with the 5th Congressional District of Georgia. He has been recognized, revered, and held to the highest esteem for the work he's done to build a better community. He broke barriers. He tore down walls. He defied stereotypes and refused to be moved from his stance on injustice, liberty, and freedom. He made time for everyone and was always picture ready. He did not miss an opportunity for a photo op or to just take a few moments to talk to his constituents or to those that revered him. His love was contagious, and it could be felt each time you were in his presence. Over the last several days, listening to the numerous accomplishments, some of which he labored for years over, it is evident why his life is being celebrated at this magnitude. He truly made an impact, not just on America, but on the world. So today we celebrate the life of Congressman John Lewis, our Uncle Robert, the man who labored, the man who talked, the man who walked, fought, knelt, sat, held hands with both blacks and whites, bled, lifted his voice, bent his knees, and was willing to give up his life for a righteous cause. Let's continue this celebration of life by taking another baton that he has now laid down and endeavor to get into trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. Let's not give up. Let's not give in. Let's never give out. Let's keep the faith, keep our eyes on the prize. Rest in power, Uncle Robert. May your legacy live on and never die. We believe you have heard the words from our Heavenly Father. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Well done. And I say to all of us, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Guess what? It's morning time.
A few years ago, Congressman John Lewis attended the inauguration of an American president. Although he had seen many presidents, he made a beeline to this president and asked him to sign his program. He signed the program in this way: because of you, John, it's my esteemed honor to welcome back to the Ebenezer pulpit 44th President of the United States of America, Barack Obama. But before he comes, Jennifer Holliday will come once again. Take my hand, precious Lord. Lead me on.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired. I am weak. I am worn through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on home. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, hear my cry. Oh, hear my call. take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. Ooh. Oh. When the darkness appears and the night draws near and the day has passed and gone. At the river, at the river I stand. God, my feet, Lord, please take my hand. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. Oh, Lord, we need you right now. We need you right now. We got a world that's in sorrow. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Take my hand, hold my hand, Lord. Guide my feet, Lord. We don't know which way to go. Yeah. Hold us in your unchanging hand. We need you, Lord. Hey, we need you, Lord. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead. Lord, we need you. Lord, we need you right now.
James wrote to the believers, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing." It is a great honor to be back at Ebenezer Baptist Church, the pulpit of its greatest pastor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to pay my respects to perhaps his finest disciple, American whose faith was tested again and again to produce a man of pure joy and unbreakable perseverance. John Robert Lewis. To those who have spoken, to Presidents Bush and Clinton, Madam Speaker, Reverend Warnock, Reverend King, John's family, friends, his beloved staff, Mayor Bottoms. I've come here today because I, like so many Americans, owe a great debt to John Lewis and his forceful vision of freedom. You know, this country is a constant work in progress. We're born with instructions to form a more perfect union. Explicit
Wow. What a powerful, powerful message by President Barack Obama. If that was not the call to action that we needed, then I mean, I don't know what is. You know, Obama spoke of, John's vision of freedom, a vision that he embodied in everything that he did. And in his death, he passes on the torch to the next generation of leaders, the next generation of activists, and yes, politicians. That's right. I'm talking about you, me, all of y'all watching, all of y'all listening. John was only 20 years old when he first got arrested for a nonviolent protest. And the last time that he was arrested was in his 70s. Okay?